Okay, there we go. Um, okay, welcome everybody. So good to have you all here. Happy Friday. We are so thrilled to have Lucy Clare Spooner as our featured artist for March this month. I am just going to quickly introduce Clare very briefly and then pass over the floor to her to give her talk and talk with all of you. And then we'll open it up for questions at the end. So if you have any burning questions, you'll be able to ask them at the end and we'll go from there. Okay, so many of you know Clare or have met Clare, but just for those of you who don't or haven't, but don't know her background, Clare is an artist, primarily painting in watercolor and oil. She lives and works in New York City, where she is right now in her little studio. She's a graduate of the University of Virginia, and she first encountered John Allen and the Marchutz School community when she visited X for an extended study period in the fall of 2016. She has been closely connected to the Marchutz community ever since then, most recently joining our New York City Museum Study Seminar this past month in February. And we are so glad to feature Clare and her work this month. And with that, I will turn it over to Clare.
Thank you. Thank you all for coming. And thank you, Rose, for asking me. You're so kind. So I have some photos because that's always fun to see a bit more, some visuals, but I wanted to give a little bit of background how I got to that point in 2016. I always love to hear how people found their way to X and John and Alan and the community. As Rose said, I went to the University of Virginia after studying, and I studied psychology and French. So I already had this love of French culture and French paintings. My grandfather was an artist, and my parents really fostered that in me. And I took a great drawing class in college right before graduating. I moved to New York City. I was working in interior design, and I just continued. I kept drawing, and just kind of on the subway, I would draw people who were in front of me. I would draw my hand. I have all these sketchbooks filled of my hand and of like kind of furtive drawings. And I was getting some pretty good feedback from one of my favorite professors, and from just people were encouraging about my drawings. And I wanted to see what would really happen if I actually devoted myself to making art. So right, like maybe 2 weeks after graduating, I had met this guy at a party who had just come back from a month in X with the Marchutz community. And he was raving about his experience. And I just kind of filed that away. And then it was time for me to change jobs. And rather than going right back into the rat race, I decided to see about that school I had heard of in my friend's kitchen. Ended up talking to Rose, and I quit my job and subletted my apartment and moved to the south of France. And my plan at that point was to be an X for 1 month, in Paris for another month, and then to kind of do whatever I wanted for a month, travel around. And I got down to X, and I completely fell in love with the people and everything beautiful happening there. And I ended up really staying for 3 months, all 3 months. I did a little bit of time in Paris too. But while in X, I had never painted in oil before. So that's, I think, very important to note. I had drawn a lot, but no oil painting. And I'm gonna share my screen. Let's see. Oh, I should have figured this out before. Okay, Rose, question. It
Yes, tell me.
says Zoom, I'm trying to share screen. Sorry, everybody. It says Zoom may not be able to record the contents of your screen until it is quit. You can choose to quit Zoom now or do it on your own later.
I haven't seen that one before.
The options are later or quit and reopen.
Maybe just say later and see if that works to share your screen.
Okay, now let's see. Sorry.
Mhm.
Here we are. Okay.
Cool.
Okay. Can y'all see that?
Yes.
Okay.
Nice copy.
Yeah, beautiful.
So this was my first copy ever. This is my first painting, my first oil painting ever. And it was just showing, because it was the idea of making a study of a painting was totally new to me. I had spent some time just on my own in the Met drawing, and that was really exciting, but the idea of actually making a painting was totally new. And then I happened to stumble upon this copy on the bottom of Cézanne's, and this, oh my gosh, is this the bark of Dante? What is this called? Bark of the, I always forget the name of this painting now that I have it up on the screen. Anyway, the idea that the copy could be actually still, you're not trying to actually copy the painting, the artist itself, but making my own. So this is Cézanne's here at the bottom. And then just a few photos from my time when I was in X. I made so many painting copies. I went with a friend. There's me doing my first ever plein air painting in Marseille. That was, I think, maybe like the second week there. I just really jumped in. This was my first plein air painting in Borokoya.
Wow.
So many. I think I was there for 90 days and I made like 88 oil paintings.
Wow.
Yeah, I went kind of crazy. I went to Cassis. And then at the same time, I was just drawing nonstop. This is a couple friends I made. We were making dinner and I was just sitting there drawing a Degas study in ink. Around this time, I also started working in watercolor, completely taught myself the medium, even though my grandfather was a watercolor painter. He died when I was in 6th grade, and he taught me some watercolor, but he was definitely much more formal, like with the washes and working up. And I think really, honestly, very luckily, I never really followed that. And I just started painting in watercolor the way that we painted in oil, which was to start with the darkest darks and work up. And I still do that. So that's a very early watercolor here. Then I joined the group in Giverny. Here's John. This is one of my favorite paintings ever. And then after this time, this was around the end of my time in X, and I went back to the city. I started working for another interior designer and was just painting at nights and weekends. And people started being interested in my work, and I started realizing with some good sales and some kind of key moments, I realized I could potentially make this a full-time gig. But I continued to join John and Alan and other students in to paint in Venice. And I started really loving painting at night. I'm a total night owl. So everyone else was making these really beautiful sunrise paintings, and I just could never get myself out of bed that morning, but I could stay up until 2 painting at night. So I did that. And then I'm including these because I think it's interesting to see as the years go by. Those are a few from Venice. Then I also joined for Giverny. And at the same time, one thing that's really stayed with me after leaving in 2016 was that I wanted to try to bring what I learned and the kind of the life that I was leading, which was so unbelievably idyllic. I wasn't working, I was just painting from morning to late at night. And I wanted to try to bring that back to my normal life in New York, which is, as we all know, not really so realistic. So many distractions, but I continued studying, and I took some classes at the Art Students League. This is this model. Somebody asked in the class if I was okay after they saw this painting, thinking they said, "I thought you were such a nice girl. It looks like you have some anger inside." And I was painting still lifes all the while. This is 2018, still working full time. Again, went to Venice. This is when I'm really noticing how my watercolors are changing. It's much easier to paint watercolor in a little studio apartment than oils with the fumes, obviously. More plein air in New York. It's a bit tough to paint plein air in New York. People, oh, hi, Sam. People will really interrupt you. So it's hard to focus, but I was doing that for a while after work. This is on the East River at 23rd Street. And then around this time, people started asking me to do commissions for them. And custom paintings are still a big part of my income. And the custom paintings this was my first art show, an outdoor art show. And those two things together are really how I figured out that I could make this a full-time thing. And then, like 3 months after this, or 4 months after, I quit my job and started painting full-time. Also joined back in Venice in 2019. I had just recently quit my job. It was such a good time to, right at the moment when I'm really, really concerned about making a living and supporting myself. I went to Venice and did nothing but paint. And I have continued doing that, where I'm really tried to get back to my roots and get back to the basis of what's so important to my practice, over and over again, even when it's hard. So, another early 2020 nude. And then we get into the pandemic, and I went back to my parents' house in Williamsburg, Virginia in that March, stayed for 4 months. And this is actually ended up being one of the best things ever for my practice, because I decided that I needed some real regimentation, and I painted my self-portrait every day and also did a drawing study of the masters. I did this for 4 months while there, and then I've really tried to continue that as I go. Have not been so good about it lately, but it's really helped me with a studio practice without having, so to be clear, I don't have an MFA or a BFA. I've never really formally studied art in a studio with people telling, giving an agenda. I've always had to figure it out for myself, which I think is one of the more difficult aspects. But knowing how I'm going to start the day with the self-portrait, which helps me be very loose, and I can explore and try some different things, and then continuing to study the masters, that's been really helpful. Also in 2020, I started painting oysters, and I have not stopped. You can see some oysters behind me. I still call them oysters in quarantine, even though we are out of quarantine. And some chickens. There were these crazy chickens everywhere at this vegetable farm, and I took a zillion photos and have worked on those also for many years. And then this is me on my parents' front porch. I did like a front porch fair. I called it the front porch Clare Fair. And people were just dying to have something to do. This was April, May, June, July of 2020. And we said, okay, it's outside, one person at a time, hand sanitizer, masks, even though we're outside. And that was actually very, very helpful for keeping me afloat, because people were just couldn't shop, and couldn't shop in person. They were dying for something to do. So that was really fun. More flowers and nudes. And this was from, I guess, 2 years ago. I do sometimes still work from photos, especially for the commissions. I work from photos. That's a big part of my income at the moment. And as we all know, making a living as an artist can be very difficult. And there's some concessions I have to make it feasible. And continuing to accept commissions is one of those. I think it's a good thing, and I'm along for the ride for a long time. But I'm pretty regimented with a day of commissions and for the week, and then the rest of the week, I really try to make my studio work, as I call it, which is working as much as I can from life. I have my same little palette. This is what I make. Every watercolor that I ever make is from this little thing that I got at Papeterie Michelle. And it's great because I just fold it up, crusty as it is, and stick it in a bag and put it in my purse. And this has gone to like so many places in the world. But I'll go, if I saw like these daffodils that are behind me here, those I just painted by the West Side Highway last week because they're blooming and they're pretty. And I took an hour or so and just went outside and painted. And I'm still doing, just last night, I went to this place for figure drawing, and I just made a bunch of drawings, and then I'll take these and make them into paintings. I wrote Venus, but that should be Aphrodite. It was like exactly the same pose as the Aphrodite, the Rodin Aphrodite. I was very excited about that. So even if I'm not painting the nude from life, I'm working from drawings that I took, or I'll have someone pose for me or something. And then I have I keep coming back to this, but find it really important to go back to my base, even when, and especially when I am trying to make a living as an artist selling my paintings. I find there's that balance, and as much as I can keep going to the Met and to other museums, but the Met is my favorite. I take trips, and I'm always going to visit museums when I'm traveling. And just as much as I can try to keep that Marchutz way of thinking in the top of mind, then I think I can maintain the balance between the commercial aspect and being true to myself and my art. This one here, this Rembrandt, I'm a little bit out of order. This is from last month's museum visit with Marchutz. And then this is just a little tiny sketchbook that I keep in my bag. And if I run to the Met, make just a quick drawing. That's a Degas bather. And then the last slide, this is me in my studio. Last year, I made a series of almost 20 oil paintings of the roads and hillsides around Charlottesville, which is where University of Virginia is located, for a show there. And that was a huge undertaking. And because I put it off a little bit. So next thing I knew, I was in the studio late, but it has done really well. A lot have sold, but more importantly, I made this body of work that I would not have really made time for if I didn't have a reason to. So that was a big and important thing. And I'm trying to make another body of nudes this year, and some more landscapes too. So I think that's about, we're caught up to where I am now.
So lovely. Thank you, Claire.
Yes.
Would you mind sharing your screen and showing us your sketchbook again so we can see it like nice and big without the shared screen?
From last night?
Yes, I would love to see that closer. And everyone on Zoom, up in the top right hand corner, there's a little thing that says view. And if you want to see Claire as your whole screen, you can change it to speaker view. So she's going to be the one that's really big on your screen. So
You're
then
so
maybe we
nice.
can see what's in your studio nice and big.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I am in my studio right now. I'm in the financial district in New York City. If you come, let me know, come visit. It's a tiny little spot, but there's a lock on the door and it's all mine. And it's thrilling. This is from this place called Happy Medium, and it's a great idea, actually. I was telling Charlie, and I also told you, Rose. Anyway, but the idea is, it's like, there's a lot of art for kids and a lot of art for professional artists, but that middle point where people just want to make art, but they don't have all the materials and they're a little bit nervous about it and everything else. This is the place to go. And of course, I also go, even though I have the stuff, but they have drawing nights too. So these are 1 minute. They did 10 1 minutes last night. I don't have to show you everything, but and just they provide the charcoal. So I'll go in sometimes with an eraser too. I meant to bring my white pencil and I forgot.
Wow.
I loved this one. But what I think I'll probably do is take this as, and then of course it has the verso here. I will probably make paintings out of several of these. She was a beautiful model and made some really interesting forms.
Wow.
That's the Aphrodite I was talking about. I love this twisted one. And it's just so nice for me. Like yesterday, I was doing a lot of paintings that I had to do that I didn't really feel like, but I had to get them done. And then to take leave, this was my favorite drawing of the night. That one. But just to be able to leave the studio and go and do something that I can just turn my mind off. Again, finding that balance between the commercial side and more of the true artist side in me, and as much as I can interweaving the two.
Mhm. Wow, so great. Thank you, Claire.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Are there any questions for Claire right now as we're here? You can just unmute yourself and ask, or you can raise your hand. Yes, Paul, please go ahead.
Hi, Claire. So good to see you.
Thank you.
When you just said, I go turn my mind off. I'm struck by that. Tell me, like, so how does that relate? Turning your mind off, how does that relate to unveiling the true artist in you?
Great question, Paul.
I mean, I'm not trying to ask too hard of a question, but I just think that struck me. I leave the studio and I turn my mind off. I just want to hear more about that.
Absolutely. So one thing that I find that bothers me is when I'm making work that I, have to do, which I hope at some season of my life, I will be doing less of that. But right now I'm very grateful for the work, to be clear. But I tend to, I'm not in a flow state usually when I'm making work that I have to. And I do things to help me turn my mind off a bit when I'm making commissions. But I am like, I'll play an audiobook, or I'll have some things on in the background. But I get a bit tight because this is it's somebody's children who I'm painting, or I just painted a friend's grandmother, for instance. And I'm going to feel a little bit tighter because I know that they have something in mind. I do have I have an understanding with my customers that I work in a certain way. I'm not overly concerned with likeness. And you've asked me to make a painting because you like my work and you've seen other examples. But still, I get a little tight. And when I go to make a drawing of a model and there's cool music going on, it's a really cool space in there, to be honest. But I'm just drawing with my shoulder. I'm hands filthy and charcoal going everywhere. And also, importantly, I don't really sell my drawings. Like I could, I guess, if somebody wanted to buy one, sure. But I'm not going in there saying, last night, actually, I do want more poses for my nude paintings. So I'll use those drawings as references. So I was thinking about that a little bit, but usually I just go in and say, okay, I always keep my drawings, but I'm like, if I toss this, if this went up in flames, doesn't really matter. I'm the practice of making is the point. And then I really turn it off. And I think as often as I can make work that doesn't matter, that's only for myself, it's not for the benefit of someone else, then I'll take that looseness into work that I am selling. If you can't tell right now, this is my full-time job, obviously. So I am paying rent by selling paintings. So I have to think about it a little bit, or a lot. And I try to, again, kind of marry the two. And as much as I can turn off in one area, then it's a good habit to be in, and it'll trickle into everywhere else.
Great. Thank you. That's a great answer. I love the notion, because I'm taking notes. I love this notion that I'm painting with my shoulder and it doesn't matter. And then somehow you're getting looser, and then that somehow informs your finished work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think what one thing I noticed, or one thing an instructor told me when I came back from my time in X, he said my work was so loose at that point. Let me see if I have my stack of a few of my sketchbooks from when I was at Marchutz, and Alan took a look at all of my work and he said, "You came here to work." I said, "I did. I did get there to work." And I made so many drawings. I want to find one from the end. Oh my gosh. And I didn't even talk about the importance of John's art history, because I've always loved learning and that kind of the total, but studying with John and that art history aspect totally changed how I look at work. And when I'm feeling like I'm missing some inspiration, I'll go back to the masters and study again. Anyway, I'm not finding, and I try to do that every day, but doesn't always happen. I'm not finding my loosest drawings here. But anyway. Oh, here's Charlie.
Oh yeah.
But I was going to say, I got sidetracked. I sidetracked myself. When I came back to the city, an instructor who I had worked a little bit with before leaving, and then re-enrolled in his classes after he saw my drawings and my work. He said, "Oh my gosh," he said, "hold on to this looseness with everything you have." He said, "The city will make you tight." And it's true, because the city is a stressful place. And that's another reason why I go to draw, because it's calming. And, again, with the turning off, it's another reason. It's very relaxing. And it's true. And I find that when I can go and travel, go back to X, go to Venice or Paris or wherever, and just get out and draw and paint if I can, then I'll get some of that looseness back. And if I can't go across the ocean, then I'll go uptown to the Met. But it's a pretty good alternative too. But that was, a big part of what I learned with the community there.
Is that also some of the motivation for night painting? Because I would imagine you can't quite see the detail as much. You're going to capture the thing.
Yeah, you're totally right. I love night painting because I'm kind of guessing at my palette a little bit. It's kind of I can't really, I mean, I could probably get better lighting on my torchlight and stuff, but yeah, it's kind of it again, it's like it's the act of making is more important than the finished product. I sound like Jackson Pollock over here. I don't mean to be. But yes, you are correct, Paul. And also I'm just a night owl, so I'm up anyway.
I love that. I was thinking about, you've been talking about like how you come back from when you have the free time to just draw and paint and you're loose and you're feeling like sort of in the groove. And then you come back to New York and you have to sort of keep that alive. That's so, and then you also talked about when you came back from your first experience with Marchutz, how you were trying to find that sort of glimpse of the sort of artist's life that is just part of the experience at Marchutz, where you're painting and drawing every day and there's not really any barriers to that practice, and trying to find that in New York too. And I see both of those things as so parallel to each other. Like, you know, you go travel and you're loose and then you come back and it's really about trying to find that sort of freedom in your everyday life. And I think that's so interesting, and something that we've heard from, you know, a ton of students saying, like, how do I experience, or how do I have the openness to continue my practice in the States? And I think it's amazing that you're so conscious of that and so diligent about finding little glimpses of getting back to that. I think it's so cool.
Yeah. Thank you, Rose. Yeah, it was something, it was really, really frustrating when I first came back. I mean, I was working in a job that I wasn't really in love with to begin with. And so that was also frustrating, but I just kept striving to find what I had just been in. And I'm in New York City. I'm not in X anymore. So if I want to go to X, I'll go to X. But rather than spending my time wishing that I were doing something that I'm not, I made some concessions and figured out how to bring it in my way, and then go to Europe. It's always Europe for me. But one thing that really helped, one second, I'm going to grab it. During the pandemic, my mom had this book downstairs. This is Sister Wendy Beckett, who is now dearly departed, but she's a nun, and she had this pretty well known, I think, TV show. And this book starts from the beginning and goes through, I don't even know what I'm showing right now, but it goes through literally the history of art, a history of painting. And I tried to kind of start at the beginning-ish, and this is what I used to make my studies every day. And so I was both teaching myself more about the chronological history of art and how one thing led to another, and then also making studies myself. Sometimes I make them in watercolor. Usually I would force myself to be a bit quicker and make them in graphite. But I absolutely love this book. It's kid friendly, adult friendly. I think it's probably more adult than children, but anyway, it goes all the way here. Who is this? Manet. And it goes up through like the 70s, maybe.
What a great book.
It's a great book, and it has been so helpful. Again, because sometimes when you're in a school and there's a curriculum, that's what I was trying to say earlier, the fact that I don't have my MFA, I don't have a BFA, I have a lot of other things. I listen to panels and I watch this and I make this and I go here and there, but I haven't really had the curriculum of giving me the structure. And sometimes what's really tough is coming into my studio and I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing today. And that's where the self-portrait and a study just gave me something, a place to start. That's half the battle, because otherwise you can, I will sit and answer emails instead of paint.
So cool. I'm curious about your nude series that you're working on. Is that for a certain show this year, or do you have a certain goal, or like the amount of paintings or the sizes or the format, or I'm so curious.
Yeah, thank you for asking. I don't have a show in mind. I loved what happened with making all of those landscapes. And I worked with an instructor from UVA who's really wonderful. Her name is Pam Black. And she also really thinks about learning to see rather than anything else, the technique. And I love her for that. She really helped me with critiques on those landscapes, and she said she would be amenable to more critiques. So that's good for keeping me on track. I have gotten totally off track with that, but I've made a few. Here are two. They are very much still in progress. And then I just the other day started one over here in this is my oil painting table over here. This is a commission here in oil, which I usually don't do commissions in oil, but I have that one there. And then this is a smaller nude that I'm working on. And I think it's easy for me to say, oh, I don't have time to make a body of work, but I do. I just have to make the time and be regimented with myself and give myself the structure to make time and having a goal in mind. I'd like to have 3 series of oil paintings. I work in watercolor all the time, but my oil painting has kind of gone by the wayside a bit, and that bothers me. And it's a good thing if I can just have my palette out, have the brushes out and ready to go. Even if the paint dries and even if I'm wasting paint, better to keep up the practice.
Absolutely. Does anyone else have questions for Claire?
Yeah, Claire, this is Barry. Thank you for this presentation. I'm impressed by your drawings. I'm interested, I think, a lot in drawings, and I understand you use charcoal more than anything else when you sketch, or is it something else?
Well, for the I love working in charcoal. For the figure drawings, I almost always use charcoal. But if I'm just in the studio making a study, I usually work in graphite.
Graphite, okay.
For those, mostly because charcoal, in terms of storage, it's just, it gets like the drawings themselves, just like you saw with the impressions on the other side, and they end up kind of getting ruined a little bit. And if I'm just like this one, I'll hold out because I'm going to use these for other nude paintings, as I said. But otherwise, I like to try to hold on to my drawings a little bit so I can refer to them later. And if they're all mushed up, then it's hard to do.
Right, exactly. And just one more question. Was your show in Charlottesville at McGuffey, or was it somewhere else?
No, it was although McGuffey was founded by my instructors husband
Oh, really?
Just-
Okay.
to kind of connect. McGuffey is not connect, for those of you, everybody else, McGuffey is an art center on the downtown mall in Charlottesville, not related to the university, but for the community there. It's a great spot. It was on the downtown mall, my show. It was at a co-working space called The Vault.
Hmm.
They have a bunch of empty wall space. It was not, as it turned out, a highly trafficked area for a show like a gallery might be, but it made me get the work done, and that was good as gold.
Yeah, great work. Thank you. I'm only an hour away from Charlottesville, so
I know.
yeah.
And I'll have a show opening in Charlottesville at a club called the Greencroft Club. The work is going up next week, thanks to my mother taking it.
Yeah.
But the opening will be in May 11th.
Great.
And I'm actually recycling, maybe I shouldn't do this, but I'm recycling some of the paintings from the other show because they're all Charlottesville
Right.
scenes.
And maybe there'll be more traffic.
I hope so.
Jenna, did you have a question?
I did. Hi, Claire. Nice to virtually meet you.
Hi,
Thank
you
you for
too.
the talk.
Yeah.
I was wondering, because you had just mentioned that you don't do oil paintings for commissions as much, and this talk of balancing that which makes you loose with influences that make you tight. If there's a pattern of things you say no to in your life, whether it's commissions or asks of your time, but if that is something you think about.
Yes, definitely. So, number one, the reason that I typically don't take oil painting commissions is that I found I was doing some when I first started painting on my own, I guess. Anyway, doesn't matter. I was doing some oil commissions, and I was just finding that I think it's maybe especially important for me to stay loose when I'm painting in oil, and maybe it's more natural for me to stay loose in watercolor, and I tend to tighten up anyway with oil. I'm not really sure, but it was, I was really not enjoying the process of painting when I was doing a commission in oil. And I wasn't liking how the paintings were coming out. People would ask for changes, and it was just ugh. So and plus I was finding it was just, anyway, it was just not really enjoyable. And then I ended up pricing. I'm like, I'm not going to say no categorically, but I'm going to price them so high that no one is going to want it. And so I'll make it really worth my time, essentially. And then this painting is something that I saw the photo reference that this customer sent me. She wanted a watercolor, and I said, to be honest, if it's in your budget, this would really be better as an oil. It's a sunset. It's a beautiful story, very sad story behind it, but a sunset after she lost someone she loved very much. And the photo she sent me was a really good reference. And so she was up for it. And so I am doing that. And even as I'm painting this in oil, I'm like, why did I agree to this? But here we are. And then in terms of other things that I say no to, I worked, this is a bit of a roundabout answer, but I started working with a PR firm earlier this year in terms of figuring out who I am, is thinking of myself as a brand, and what's important to me and how I want to be perceived by the outside world. And she helped me figure out what my, I know what that is, but putting it down on paper has been really important. And then any subsequent decision I need to make, I refer back to my pillars, and then I decide if it's the right thing for me, for my brand, for my practice, because they're all wrapped up in one. So when I think of like me as an artist and what my brand is, I'm not just thinking about my commercial side, but also the fact that I take a long walk in the morning to clear my mind. The fact that I make commissions, I do this, I do that, all of the things are all in there at once. So things I say no to are prints. I don't make any prints of my work. I don't think there's anything wrong with it, but frankly, I don't think, for me, the colors never really come through, and it's just, I've kind of categorically said no to that. Another example is I'm doing for Lent, which ends in a week. I decided to do a study of art through the Bible. And this can be a bit of a polarizing thing. I don't want to turn people away or make them feel that if they're not a Christian or don't believe in the Bible, then I still want them to feel that they can have something to do with it, because one of the things that I really learned at Marchutz was studying the text, and just reading so much more than I ever did before. I always read a lot, but I wasn't reading Flannery O'Connor or Dante. And the same way as I would read Greek mythology, if I'm studying a painting of a Greek mythology, I find that understanding the Bible is so helpful in understanding biblical paintings. So what I'm doing for this is very simple. It's a biblical painting and the Bible verse. There's no commentary whatsoever, no religious affiliation needed. And I was really, really torn, because I wanted to do it just for myself. I was really torn whether I would share it with other people. And I was talking to this woman about it, and she said, well, look at your tenets. Is this something, are you talking about art history that you enjoy? Are you shoving religion down people's throats? No. So art history, yes. Shoving religion, no. And so I ended up talking about it on my Instagram this week, and I've had incredible, really, really positive feedback. And I think, I don't even know if I'm answering your question at this point.
No, you are. Yeah, I mean, saying no takes many, many forms.
Yeah.
But it's an interesting mix of like proactive and then exclusionary things too, right? Even with Lent, like you're making a commitment to do a practice, which is very proactive, and still setting boundaries on it. So no, thank you.
Are there any other questions? Yeah, Jan, you have a question? You'll just have to unmute yourself.
I don't really have a question. I just want to say that I found this very inspiring, even though I'm not applying it to keep making, physical art. But some of the practices in writing are the same. Some of the advice is really interesting, and I find it very inspiring.
Well, thank you, Jan. And it's funny you say that, because one of the books that I read that really helped with my practice was Anne Lamott's Bird by Bird.
Yeah.
And just starting, just doing it and finding tricks. Like, again, my self-portraits and my studies are tricks to get me to just start. And that's
do the same thing with answering email in the morning. Putting off writing.
Totally. I know.
Thank you.
So great. Well, if there aren't any more questions, then I think we'll probably wrap up here because we're getting to the end of the hour. But thank you so much, Claire, for taking the time to be our featured artist and giving this talk today. It's so wonderful to hear more about your practice and everything. So
Well, thank
lovely.
you all for joining and for having me, Rose.
Of course, my pleasure. And this will be recorded. So if you want to share with friends or family or anybody, feel free. And I'll send a little follow-up email to all of you after this so you have the link. Thank you,
Wonderful.
everybody, for joining.
Thank you, Claire.
Thank you, Claire.
Thank you, Claire.
Lovely.
So
Bye.
lovely. Talk to you all
Bye.
soon.
Bye all.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.